2 days ago, at precisely 1747 UTC, the moon crossed directly in front of the sun at 20 degrees Leo. For 2 minutes and 18 seconds, along a narrow path stretching from Arctic Russia through Greenland and Iceland to northern Spain, the sky went dark in the middle of the afternoon. The corona appeared, the temperature dropped, and the Perseid meteors, which peaked the same day, became briefly visible in a sky that should have been daylight. Those who were in the path of totality experienced it as spectacle. Those who were not experienced it as a news headline and a social media feed full of photographs. Most people in both groups will move on by tomorrow. This video is for those who will not, because what happened on August 12th was not a spectacle. It was a fracture, and fractures do not close on their own. An eclipse is not a cosmic event in the way popular astrology describes it. A powerful portal, a moment of transformation, a chance to set intentions under the darkened sun. That is the consumer version. It is harmless and useless in roughly equal measure. What an eclipse actually does, in the framework we have been building since March, is draw a line through the structural timeline, a fracture line. Everything that existed before the line is on one side. Everything that exists after is on the other. And the two sides do not reconnect. The fracture is permanent. Not because eclipses are powerful, because eclipses activate an axis, a polarity between two opposing principles. And once an axis is activated, it does not deactivate until the eclipse series completes. The Leo-Aquarius axis activated on August 12th. It will not deactivate until January 2028. 18 months, 7 eclipses across this axis. And every one of them deepens the fracture that the first one opened. Here is the forensic analysis. What the fracture is, what it split, and where it leads. The Saros cycle. Every eclipse belongs to a family. A series of eclipses that recur every 18 years and 11 days. Each one roughly 10 degrees further west and slightly different in character, but carrying the same structural signature. The August 12th eclipse belongs to Saros cycle 126. This family has been producing eclipses since the year 1263 and will continue until 2543. 780 years of the same structural theme, expressed through 72 individual eclipses, each one a chapter in a story that predates the modern nation-state. What makes Saros cycles relevant is inheritance. The eclipse you witnessed on August 12th is not a standalone event. It inherits its structural charge from every previous eclipse in the same family. The themes that this Saros cycle carries, the tensions it activates, the domains it fractures, the questions it forces, are the same themes its predecessor carried 18 years ago, and the one before that 36 years ago, and the one before that 54 years ago. The family has memory, and the memory shapes the fracture. The previous chapter of Saros 126 was August 11th, 2018, a partial solar eclipse at 11 degrees Leo. Partial, not total, meaning the fracture was present but not complete. Think of 2018 as the hairline crack. 2026 is the crack widening into a structural fracture. What started in 2018 is not repeating, it is completing. Think about what was happening in your life in August 2018. Not the world, your life. What structures were being questioned? What identity was being renegotiated? What belonging felt newly conditional? What authority were you beginning to doubt? Whatever that was, the process did not complete. It paused. The hairline crack was not wide enough to force a structural response. It was ignorable. Most people ignored it. The crack remained. The structure continued. But the structural integrity was already compromised, invisibly, at a level that would only become apparent under load. On August 12, 2026, the load arrived. The total solar eclipse applied full structural pressure to the same axis where the hairline crack had been sitting for 8 years. The crack opened. Not a new fracture. the widening of an existing one. This is why the events around August 12th may feel familiar. Not identical to 2018, the person has changed, the circumstances have changed. But the domain is the same, the axis is the same, the structural question is the same. The specificity is different. 8 years more specific, 8 years more precise, 8 years closer to the question the fracture is actually asking. Go back further. August 11th, 1999, a total solar eclipse at 18 degrees Leo. The last total solar eclipse visible from mainland Europe before this one. 27 years between the two, and the structural symmetry is precise enough to serve as a map for what follows now. In 1999, the eclipse coincided with a grand cross in fixed signs: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. One of the most intense configurations of the 20th century. Astrologers at the time predicted catastrophe. What occurred was more interesting than catastrophe. It was a fracture that did not look like one until months later. The months following the August 99 eclipse, the dot-com bubble reached its apex in March 2000, 7 months after the fracture. The identity architecture of an entire generation of entrepreneurs fractured. The persona of the tech visionary, which had been performed with increasing extravagance through the late 90s, hit the wall of structural reality. Companies that were pure performance, stock price without revenue, brand without product, visibility without substance, broke. The fracture between who these companies said they were, Leo, the performance, and what they actually contributed to the collective, Aquarius, systemic value, became unbridgeable. The bubble was not a market event, it was a Leo-Aquarius fracture event. Performance separated from substance, and the market priced the gap. At the personal level, the evidence is consistent across dozens of accounts. People who were in their 20s and 30s in '99 report a specific experience in the months following the eclipse. A fracture between who they were performing being and who they actually were. Relationships that looked stable from the outside but were held together by performance rather than alignment, split. Careers that looked promising but were chosen for visibility rather than fit, redirected. The identity that had been constructed through the '90s, optimistic, aspirational, performed for an audience of peers and parents, hit the eclipse wall. The wall is always the same, the gap between the Leo-constructed identity and the Aquarius authentic function. When the gap is small, the eclipse adjusts. When the gap is large, the eclipse fractures. August 10th, 1980, same axis. The eclipse preceded the early '80s recession, but the recession was the surface. Underneath, a structural shift from industrial identity to service identity in the Western economies. The fracture was vocational. Entire categories of work, manufacturing, heavy industry, unionized labor, lost their identity-conferring power. A factory worker in 1979 derived identity from the job. By 1983, the same job conferred less identity, less status, less belonging. The Leo-Aquarius fracture had restructured what counted as meaningful work, not through policy, through a shift in the collective valuation of individual contribution. August 11th, 1961, same axis. The fracture here was the most visible of the four. The Berlin Wall went up, a literal physical manifestation of the Leo-Aquarius split. Individual freedom, Leo, versus collective control, Aquarius. The sovereign self versus the administered group. The same year the Peace Corps was founded, an attempt to bridge the fracture by channeling individual initiative, Leo, into collective service, Aquarius. And Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth, fracturing the boundary between here and out there, between the personal scale and the cosmic scale, between the individual human and the species as a whole. Each event in '61 was a different face of the same fracture. And the restructuring that followed, The entire decade of the 60s was the civilization's attempt to build new architecture across the gap the eclipse had opened. The pattern across these four eclipses, 61, 80, 99, 2026, is not thematic repetition, it is structural inheritance. Each eclipse at this axis reopens the same fracture and deepens it. The fracture runs along the Leo-Aquarius polarity. Leo, individual identity, creative self-expression, personal authority, the heart, the will to be seen. Aquarius, collective structures, distributed networks, systemic belonging, the group, the will to serve the whole. When the axis fractures, the tension between these two poles becomes unmanageable within the existing architecture. The person, or the civilization, can no longer hold both simultaneously. Something breaks, and what breaks determines what gets rebuilt. 3 fracture lines. Each one corresponds to a domain of the Leo-Aquarius polarity, and each one is already producing observable effects, not in weeks or months, but now, in the first 48 hours after the eclipse. Fracture line 1, identity, who you present versus who you are. Leo governs the constructed self, the identity that faces the world, the persona that performs, the version of you that has been optimized for visibility, approval, and social survival. Aquarius governs the authentic self as it exists within the collective, not the private self, that is the moon's domain, but the self that emerges when the performance stops and the question becomes, who am I when I am not performing for anyone? The eclipse fractures the interface between these two. The performance that was sustainable before August 12th becomes visibly unsustainable after. Not because anything external changed, but because the fracture exposed the gap. The gap between the LinkedIn profile and the person who writes it. The gap between the social media presence and the person behind the screen. The gap between the professional role and the human occupying it. If the gap is small, if the performance and the person are closely aligned, the fracture produces a minor adjustment, a refinement, a tightening of the alignment. If the gap is large, if the performance has drifted significantly from the person over years or decades, the fracture produces a crisis. Not a dramatic explosion, a quiet structural crisis, the sudden inability to continue performing. The mask does not shatter, it simply stops fitting. And the person cannot figure out why the role that was comfortable last month now produces a physical register of wrongness. This fracture line will deepen over the next 18 months. Each subsequent eclipse on the Leo-Aquarius axis will widen the gap between performance and person, making it progressively harder to maintain identities that are constructed rather than genuine. The people who feel this fracture most acutely are those whose professional and social identities are highly curated, entrepreneurs with personal brands, public-facing professionals, anyone whose income depends on being perceived in a specific way. The fracture does not punish curation. It exposes the distance between the curated version and the structural version, and it makes that distance increasingly expensive to maintain. Fracture line 2, belonging. Your tribe versus your truth. Leo is the individual, the sovereign, the creative center, the one who stands alone. Aquarius is the collective day, the group, the network, the community that provides belonging in exchange for alignment. The eclipse fractures the contract between these two. The terms of belonging that were acceptable before August 12th become questionable after. This shows up as a specific experience, looking at the groups, communities, and social structures you belong to, and feeling for the first time, or with new intensity, that the cost of belonging exceeds the value. The cost is conformity, the suppression of individual perspective, creative impulse, or authentic direction in order to remain accepted. The value is safety, the social, emotional, and sometimes financial security that group membership provides. Before the eclipse, the equation balanced. After the eclipse, the equation visibly does not. This does not mean leaving every group. It means the unconscious contracts that govern membership are now conscious. The person sees the terms. And seeing the terms changes the relationship, whether they stay or leave. Some groups will survive the fracture because the terms are genuine. Others will not because the terms were built on the pre-fracture version of the person, and the post-fracture version cannot meet them. The 18-month trajectory, by January 2028, the social landscape of anyone strongly affected by this eclipse will look different. Not dramatically, structurally. The number of groups may be the same, but the composition will have shifted. Some old memberships will have ended, some new ones will have begun, and the basis of belonging will have changed from "I fit in here" to "I am genuinely aligned here." The distinction is subtle and consequential. Fracture line 3, authority, personal versus institutional. Leo is personal authority, the individual who leads, creates, decides, and takes responsibility for the outcome. Aquarius is institutional authority, the structure, the organization, the collective that distributes decision-making across nodes rather than concentrating it in a single person. The eclipse fractures the trust relationship between these two forms. This fracture line is the most macro of the three and the one most visible at the collective level. The institutional structures that the individual has been delegating authority to, employers, governments, financial institutions, media organizations, educational systems, are now visibly failing to justify the delegation. Not because they became worse on August 12th, because the fracture made the failure visible. The incompetence that was tolerable before the eclipse becomes intolerable after. The inefficiency that was accepted becomes unacceptable. The promises that were taken on faith become subject to verification. Not gradually, abruptly. The eclipse did not create institutional failure. It removed the perceptual filter that was hiding it. At the personal level, this manifests as a shift in locus of authority. The person who was comfortable deferring decisions to an employer, a financial advisor, a doctor, a guru, begins questioning the delegation. Not all of it. Specifically, the delegations that are not producing results commensurate with the authority surrendered. The question is not, should I trust institutions? The question is, which specific delegations of authority are still justified, and which are costing me more in autonomy than they are returning in competence? The 18-month trajectory of this fracture line is the most consequential. By 2028, the relationship between individuals and institutions will have structurally renegotiated across every domain this axis touches. This is not a prediction of institutional collapse. Institutions adapt. It is a prediction of institutional renegotiation. The terms change, the expectations shift, and the individuals who renegotiated early have better terms than those who waited until the renegotiation was forced. Now, the 2-week corridor. August 12th was the opening fracture. August 28th is the completion. A partial lunar eclipse in Pisces, the 6th eclipse on the Virgo-Pisces axis that has been running since September 2024. This is the final eclipse of the old set. While the Leo-Aquarius series is beginning, the Virgo-Pisces series is ending. 2 eclipse axes overlapping, one opening, one closing. The structural effect, the end of one restructuring phase and the beginning of another, occurring simultaneously. The lunar eclipse does not fracture, it releases. Solar eclipses are incisions, precise, targeted, structural. Lunar eclipses are dissolutions, diffuse, emotional, clearing. What the solar eclipse on August 12th cracked open, the lunar eclipse on August 28th washes out. The emotions, attachments, identifications, and old loyalties that were lodged in the cracks of the old structure get flushed. The Pisces energy of the lunar eclipse is specifically suited for this. Pisces dissolves boundaries, releases what no longer serves, and creates space through emptying rather than through constructing. The 2 weeks between August 12th and August 28th are a corridor, a passage between the break and the clearing. During this corridor, the fracture lines are active but unstable. The old structure is cracked but not yet cleared. The new structure has not yet begun to form. Think of it as the gap between demolition and site clearing. The building has been fractured, walls cracked, foundations exposed, structural weaknesses revealed. But the rubble has not been removed. The site is not yet clean. The corridor is the rubble removal phase, and the rubble is emotional, the grief over identities that no longer fit, the disorientation of belonging structures that are now visibly conditional, the anxiety of authority delegations that are no longer trusted. This corridor is uncomfortable. It is supposed to be. The forensic window, the time to examine the fracture before the clearing removes the evidence, is precisely this 2-week period. After August 28th, the emotional charge dissipates. The fracture lines remain, but the acute awareness of what broke softens. This is why the forensics must be done now, while the cracks are fresh and the edges are sharp. After the clearing, the memory of what broke becomes diffuse, and diffuse memories produce diffuse rebuilding. Precise forensics produce precise reconstruction. What to track during the corridor? 3 domains corresponding to the 3 fracture lines. In the identity domain, where has the performance become visibly misaligned with the person? What role, title, or public presentation no longer fits? And when did the misfit become apparent? Was it sudden on August 12th, or has it been building for months and the eclipse simply made it undeniable? The distinction matters. Sudden fractures are eclipse-initiated. Gradual fractures that the eclipse exposed are structural. They predate the eclipse and will persist after the corridor closes regardless of attention. In the belonging domain, which group, community, or social structure is producing a cost of membership awareness that was not present before August 12th? Where does belonging now feel conditional in a way that was previously invisible? Which tribe is demanding conformity that the post-fracture self cannot provide? And conversely, where does a new sense of belonging emerge, unexpected, with a group or community that was not previously on the map? In the authority domain, which delegation of decision-making to an institution or external authority is now producing friction that was previously tolerable? Where is the gap between the competence you expected from the institution and the competence you are receiving? And what would it look like, concretely, to reclaim that specific delegation? Not all authority, one specific delegation, the one where the gap is largest. These are not journal prompts, they are forensic questions. The answers are data. The data determines what the 18-month restructuring will target, and whether the restructuring is guided by the architect or driven by default. The 18-month map. The Leo-Aquarius Eclipse series runs from February 2026 through January 2028. 7 eclipses. Each one deepens and extends the 3 fracture lines opened on August 12th. The trajectory is not linear, it is iterative. Each eclipse revisits the fracture, tests what has been rebuilt, fractures what is still weak, and reinforces what is holding. The key dates. February 2026 was the first eclipse on this axis, an annular solar eclipse in Aquarius. It set the stage. August 2026, this eclipse, is the first Leo side activation. It personalized the fracture. What was collective in February becomes individual in August. The next major hit, February 2027, another eclipse on the axis, returning to the Aquarius side. What was fractured individually in August gets tested against the collective in February. Did the rebuilt identity function within the restructured group? Did the renegotiated belonging terms hold under collective pressure? Did the reclaimed authority survive institutional pushback? The final eclipse of the series, January 2028. This is the resolution point. Whatever architecture has been built across the 18-month fracture period gets locked in. The structures that held become load-bearing for the next cycle. The structures that did not hold get cleared, finally, fully, without ambiguity. There is one more element. On August 31st, 3 days after the lunar eclipse closes the corridor, Jupiter forms a trine with Saturn. Jupiter at 13 degrees Leo, Saturn at 13 degrees Aries, both in fire signs. This is the first of two such aspects. The next, April 2027. Jupiter-Saturn trines are rare harmonics, moments when expansion and structure align rather than conflict. In the context of the eclipse forensics, this trine is architecturally significant. It provides the first structural support after the fracture. The eclipse broke, the lunar eclipse cleared, and the Jupiter-Saturn trine offers the first materials for rebuilding. Not the blueprint, the architect's declaration is the blueprint, updated for the post-fracture landscape. The materials are the opportunities, connections, and structural supports that the trine delivers. Jupiter in Leo provides the creative vision, the capacity to see what the new architecture could become. Saturn in Aries provides the structural discipline, the willingness to build it with precision rather than enthusiasm. Fire trine fire, vision structured by discipline. The rarest building configuration of the year. The sequence is precise. Break, August 12th. Clear, August 28th. Build, August 31st. 3 days between clearing and building. Not 3 months, not 3 weeks, 3 days. The fire horse does not wait. The rebuilding begins before the dust settles. And those who have examined the fracture, who know what broke, why, and what the replacement architecture requires, they will build faster and more precisely than those who are still processing the spectacle. The forensics sheet, 3 fracture lines, tracking prompts for each, and a 30-day assessment framework is in the Telegram channel. Fill it out this week while the corridor is open and the fracture lines are still fresh. By August 28th, the clearing begins. By August 31st, the first materials arrive. What you build depends on what you saw in the crack. The eclipse was not a moment. It was a fracture line drawn through the next 18 months of the structural timeline. The Leo-Aquarius axis is active. The 3 fracture lines, identity, belonging, authority, they are producing observable effects right now in the first 48 hours. The corridor between the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse is 2 weeks. The rebuilding materials arrive 3 days after the corridor closes, and the architecture that gets built on the post-fracture foundation will stand for the duration of the Leo-Aquarius eclipse series through January 2028 and for the load-bearing elements far beyond. What broke on August 12th cannot be unbroken. The fracture is structural. The question is not whether to rebuild, it is what to build, and whether the architect is present for the construction.